torpedo from an airplane, it comes down pretty fast, and it will go too deep and will explode against the floor of the harbor. Well, the Japanese had studied the British attack on the Italian Navy at Taranto in 1940, when the British had figured out how to have shallow torpedoes. And so, very simple invention. Take a big, sophisticated, very heavy steel torpedo and attach to it 2 wooden wings. And the wooden wings slow it down a little bit as it's coming down, but more importantly, when they hit the water and they break off, the amount of energy it takes to break them off slows the torpedo down. So the Japanese, and we portray this pretty vividly in the book, the Japanese in the summer of 1941 practice shallow torpedo runs and convince themselves they can do it. They convince themselves they can do it. And they then build an entire replica of Pearl Harbor, a full-size replica on the inland sea, where they are practicing exactly what they will do, exactly how they will do it. It's a very heavily trained mission that they worked at a long time. One last thing, we write what we call active history, which means we change it. Our theory is that people think of history as something dead that you memorize. And our interest is to get you to think about it. Why did they do what they did? What were their other choices? What else could they have done? And so we set out to write books in which something different happens. So you actually start saying, gee, could that have happened? Was that possible? What were their choices? And in the case of Pearl Harbor, what we did is just one change. In real history, the Japanese assigned the carrier task force to an Admiral Nagumo, who is a battleship admiral who doesn't understand air power, and he's relatively timid. So when they get off of Pearl Harbor and they launch the first 2 strikes and they're successful, and all of the aviation staff is saying, you have to launch a 3rd strike, you have to go do a 3rd strike. Nagumo says, no, we've been successful, let's go home. So we thought to ourselves, what if those same aviation staff had gone to Admiral Yamamoto in September? Now, Yamamoto is the senior Japanese admiral. He's the commander of the whole combined fleet. He's their best strategist. In the 1930s, he develops naval aviation. He's the admiral who best understands naval aviation. He had been the captain of a aircraft carrier in the early 1930s. And interestingly, at a personal level, Admiral Yamamoto is a gambler. When he was stationed in the U.S., he made a lot of money playing poker. When he was stationed in Europe, he made money at the casinos at Monte Carlo. And he's a man who believed in gambling on his luck. So we thought to ourselves, if we got him to decide that he would replace Nagumo. So he came forward with the fleet. And he had finished 2 successful waves of attacking Pearl Harbor, and he knew that there were no American aircraft left. But basically, by the end of the second attack, the Japanese had wiped out about 90% of our aircraft. We think there is 0 doubt he'd have launched a 3rd attack, which does a tremendous amount of damage, because it takes out all the submarines that had not yet been hit. It takes out the oil tank farms, and it significantly makes it harder for the United States to recover. We also think one other thing. Because Nagumo was a battleship commander, he thought it was terrific that they had sunk all of our battleships. Yamamoto would have said, where are the aircraft carriers? Because there were supposed to be 3 aircraft carriers at Pearl Harbor. One of them, the Saratoga, has gone to Bremerton, Washington, where it's being overhauled. The Japanese didn't realize that. The second, the Lexington, has gone to Midway to deliver aircraft. The third, the Enterprise under Admiral Halsey, has gone to Wake Island to deliver aircraft. So on that particular Sunday morning, where normally every Sunday the aircraft carriers are sitting at Pearl, there were 0 aircraft carriers at Pearl. And so we end this novel with the following thought: that Yamamoto, having successfully smashed Pearl, would have said to himself, where are the American carriers? And so Volume 2, which we urge you to come back to our book signing next year right here at the same place, Volume 2 will be Admiral Halsey versus Admiral Yamamoto, as there was a duel among aircraft carriers off Hawaii in the second week of December, 1941. I mean, I hope you find this to be an interesting book. We've had a lot of fun writing it. Three of us work on it together, and you should see the arguments we get into. I will say also, while we invent two characters in the book, an American intelligence officer and a British officer turned journalist and spy, everything else in the book is essentially accurate up to the point where Yamamoto comes forward. I mean,